Most Americans still have no idea this just happened. And if you're planning to retire, this could affect your money more than you think. Curious. Because while everyone is busy watching headlines, something much bigger may have quietly changed in the background. A unanimous Supreme Court decision, all 9 justices agreeing, has just triggered a shift that could impact retirement planning across all 50 states. Surprised. Not just one state, not just one program. Every state. And here's what makes this serious. This doesn't just affect people who are already retired. It reaches directly into the financial future of anyone planning to retire in the next 5, 10, even 20 years. So if you have a pension, if you're contributing to a 401k, if you rely on Social Security, or if you've chosen where to retire based on tax rules, you need to pay attention. Shouting. Because what we're talking about today isn't just legal theory. It's about whether the rules you've trusted for decades can suddenly change after you've already built your life around them. Welcome to Seniors Authority, where we break down the changes that actually impact your retirement, your money, and your future. I'm Floyd, and today we're going to uncover what this really means and why most people are missing the biggest part of the story. And trust me, what happens next might surprise you. Now, here's where things get unusual. This wasn't a divided court. There was no political split, no 5-4 decision. Every single justice agreed. And when that happens, it usually means one thing: something fundamental needed to be clarified. But here's the part most people aren't asking. What exactly needed to be clarified? The question at the center of all this was simple, but powerful. Can the government change retirement rules after people have already built their financial lives around them? Now, before you answer that, think about your own situation for a second. Imagine you're 62 years old. You've spent decades working, saving, planning. You've calculated your retirement income down to the dollar. Maybe you even moved to another state for better tax benefits. Everything is lined up. Everything makes sense. And then suddenly, the rules change. Your taxes increase. Your benefits shift. Your timeline moves. Not years earlier, but right when you're about to retire. Take a second and think about that. Because for some people, that's not a hypothetical. That's reality. And here's the part that makes this even more important. Situations like this have happened before. States have adjusted pension formulas. They've changed retirement ages. They've introduced new taxes on retirement income. And most people didn't even realize what was happening until it started affecting their monthly income. But here's where things take a serious turn. There's now a growing legal idea that could change how these situations are handled moving forward. It's called reliance, and the idea is simple. If you made long-term financial decisions based on existing laws, those decisions shouldn't be used against you later. In other words, the rules shouldn't change after the game has already started. Now here's where it gets interesting. This entire situation didn't start with a national policy. It started with one person, one retiree, no headlines, no media attention, just someone who believed something wasn't fair. They challenged a change that affected retirement planning after years of relying on the previous system. The state responded the way governments usually do. They said, "We need flexibility." They argued that laws must evolve, that budgets change, that adjustments are necessary, and on the surface, that makes sense. But here's the problem. Retirement planning doesn't happen in the short term. It happens over decades. People don't just save money. They make life decisions. They decide when to retire, where to live, how to invest, how to structure their future. And all of those decisions are based on one assumption: that the system won't suddenly shift against them. But what happens if that assumption isn't true? That's the real question here. And it's why this conversation matters more than most people realize. Now, before we go further, I'm curious. If you're planning to retire in the next 10-15 years, comment retirement below and let me know what state you're planning to retire in, because this could affect people very differently depending on where they live. Now let's break this down even further, because this doesn't just affect one group. It affects multiple groups in different ways. Start with public employees, teachers, police officers, firefighters. Millions of people rely on pension systems with fixed formulas. They spend decades working under those systems. They plan their entire future around those numbers. Now imagine those numbers change after 20 or 25 years of service. That's not a small adjustment. That's a completely different retirement. Now think about retirees who moved states. This happens more than people realize. Some states don't tax retirement income. Others offer special benefits. So people make life-changing decisions. They sell homes, they relocate, they rebuild their lives, all based on those financial rules. Now imagine those rules change after you've already moved. That decision suddenly looks very different. And then there's Social Security. While it's a federal program, state-level taxes still matter. Some states tax Social Security income, others don't. And again, people plan around that. They build their future based on those expectations. So when you step back and look at the full picture, this isn't just about law, it's about trust. Trust that the rules you rely on today will still be there tomorrow. But here's where things get even more interesting. Not everyone agrees on how far this should go. Some experts argue that giving too much protection could create problems. For example, if a pension system is struggling financially, should the state be allowed to adjust it, or should it stay locked because people relied on it? That's where things get complicated. And that's why this story isn't over. It's just beginning. Because what happens next will depend on how states respond and how future decisions are interpreted. Now let's bring this back to you. What should you actually do right now? First, awareness. Understand how your state handles retirement income. Know your tax situation. Be clear on the rules you're planning under. Second, documentation. Keep records of policies that apply to you. Because if things ever change, that information could become more important than you think. And third, stay informed. Because the people who understand these changes early are the ones who adapt, who adjust, who protect their future. And now, let's go back to where this all started. That one retiree. No one expected that case to go this far. No one expected it to spark a conversation that could affect millions. But sometimes, big changes don't start with big headlines. They start quietly and grow over time. And right now, we may be at the beginning of something like that. So the next time someone says, retirement rules don't really change that much, you'll know better. Because now you understand something most people don't. And that puts you ahead. If you've made it this far, you're already ahead of 90% of people watching this. So make sure you stay connected with Seniors Authority. Because we're going to keep breaking down the updates that actually matter. Not the noise, not the hype, but the real changes that could impact your retirement, your money, and your future. And remember, most Americans still don't even know this happened, but now you do.